took my office, so I'm in a spare bedroom.
All right, we're live.
Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Hi.
Just wait for everyone to join us.
Oh, there we go.
Let me see.
What am I reading? I need to think about it.
Okay, people are here. Yay.
Okay. Hi, everybody.
Good morning from Australia.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow.
Good morning.
It's always crazy to me how Australia is so far ahead.
I know.
Mhm.
Hi, Shelly. Hi, Claudia. Hi, Lisa. Veronica. It's good to see everybody. Oh,
Yay.
no, another Aussie. Hi. Hi to Saturday. Hey, y'all. The girl with glasses.
Okay, so we can just start off talking about what we're reading right now. Just ease into our chat.
Okay.
Jess, want to start?
I can start, yeah. I just finished listening to the audiobook of The Madness of Lord Ian Mackenzie by Jennifer
I love that book.
Me too, me too.
I'm sorry, because if you didn't love that book, then I just screamed, I love that book. I'm sorry.
Good. I'm so happy I finally listened to it.
Yeah.
I loved his character, Ian's character, and then I'm so excited for everybody else's books now. I haven't looked at his next, but
I think it's Cameron.
Is it?
Or Mac. It's the married couple.
That's
one.
Mac, and I'm so excited.
I love
and I love Ian because I think there's speculation that character is on the spectrum.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
which is close to my heart, of course. So I love the book so much.
It was really good.
Yeah.
So I am reading Say Yes to the Duke by Eloisa James.
Okay.
Yeah, this is her newest release. It's super cute so far. It's like a big, giant, stoic hero, but a cinnamon roll inside, and he falls for this really tiny lady, and he's trying to woo her and get her to marry him.
Oh, that's good. That's good. You know what? I don't get to read very much usually because I don't read a lot when I'm under deadline. But I'm not under deadline right now. So I've been reading like a mad woman. I consume most of my books through audio. That's my favorite way to read. It's really the only way I read, unless I'm reading an art for a friend. And so I had read Indigo by Beverly Jenkins. I just finished the audiobook of that.
I love that book.
Such a long audio, though, right?
Yeah.
Gosh, it's a long audiobook.
It is. You know,
like
it's 13,
it's 13 hours.
13 hours. Yeah, it's like 13 hours. It was so, I mean, I had read it, but the audio was so good. And like I said, I read audio. That's how I read. I finished Beach Read last week. Have you guys read Beach Read?
Yes.
Fantastic.
It was amazing. It lived up to the hype.
I was just about to say, you know how a lot of times you're like, okay, there's so much hype around that book. There's no way it's that good. I was literally like messaging her like, oh my gosh, you're writing your ass off. Can we curse?
Yeah, you can.
I was like, oh my gosh, Emily, you're writing your ass off. This is so good. I was totally fangirling. And then I'm right now reading Take a Hint, Danny Brown. I just started.
So good.
It's so good. I wish I had time to read it earlier, but I was under deadline. And I told you I've been reading a lot. I also read Real Men Knit by Kawana Jackson. So good. So I've just been like on a tear, and I'm usually read like 4 books a quarter if it's not audio. If it's not audio, yeah. So that's me. I've had some hits.
Yeah, those are all really popular books.
Yes, I know. And I usually read. Only one of those was historical. My favorite subgenre is historical, and so I had just finished right before that listening to. You guys ever read or have listened to Sherry Thomas?
Oh, I'm listening to it right now, actually.
Which one? Which
This
one?
Tempting the Bride.
Oh, okay. I'm not in that series yet, but
Okay.
I haven't started that series yet. But I
Mhm.
just finished. I mean, I've done Not Quite a Husband. I've done several, and I'm trying to remember which one I just did. Anyway, Sherry Thomas, and I'm re-listening to Laura Kinsale because Kinsale is the bar for me.
Oh,
And
I
so,
have one of your recommendations,
Oh.
Flowers from the Storm. I need to read it.
Oh, did you say you haven't read it yet?
I haven't, no.
Oh, I can. That book sends me. Okay, so there are certain books I have that I just listen to over and over and over again. And so Flowers from the Storm is one of them. And I literally have like The First Kiss. I like have, you know how you can mark them? I mark all the spots. And when I'm feeling like I just need something, I'll just go to them.
Yeah.
And then the one I was listening to is, I don't know if you guys are into medieval books at all. I love medieval. It's so primal, you know?
Yes.
So primal. And so she has a medieval series. And the first one is My Lady's Heart, I think. And that one's fine. But my favorite is the second, which is Shadow Heart. And I listen to that one over and over and over again. And the narrator, she uses the same narrator all the time. I'm talking too much. I'm so sorry.
No, it's great.
Audiobooks and Laura Kinsale. I'm just like, cut me, I bleed Kinsale. But she uses the same narrator all the time. And most historicals use female narrators, which is great. But she uses the most spectacular male narrator, Nicholas Bolton. And he is just, you will listen to the sample of any Kinsale audiobook. That's who you'll hear. And they are just 18. So what speed do I listen to my audios? Regular speed. My husband listens like 2 times. And I'm like, babe, it's like,
well, me and Jess.
Oh,
I'm at 2.5 speed.
I like 3 times speed if they don't have an accent. So
that is chipmunk. Chipmunk, Jess. How do you even process it?
Right.
I talk fast naturally, though, so.
Yeah, I do too, but I don't listen fast. And so basically a 13-hour audiobook takes you, what, 9? Yeah.
So I guess I should listen to Indigo. I'm just intimidated by
you should.
Because I love Jenkins audiobooks.
Yes.
Yeah, I prefer audiobooks.
Forbidden. That's my next audiobook of hers. It's on Hoopla. She has like, well, I guess Hoopla is like connected to your local library. So my Hoopla has like 12 audiobooks of hers. So Forbidden is next. But
that's the Old West series, right?
Yes.
Okay, I love that series.
That's the one that's going to be the movie.
Oh, wait, yeah.
Because we read that for our book club.
That's going to be a movie. I didn't realize. I knew
production with
was going to be been optioned. But I didn't know it was that one. That's really cool.
I think that's the one with the ripped bodice, right? Like
I think
producing it. Yeah.
Yeah, and they're doing one of Alyssa's too, aren't they? I'm trying to think.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I don't let me break news. Fake news. Don't let me break news. Maybe not. But I thought the Rip Bodice had optioned one of Alyssa's too. I'll have to Google it. I have to get on my Google machine and see. Someone's asking, how do you get above 2? Jessica, since you listen so high, how do you get above 2? Because I use Libby and Overdrive on my phone. They only go to 2. You guys are trying to go to 3. You can even get past
Libby goes up to 3. I use 2.5.
I don't know how you're
really?
Only my Hoopla is Audible.
Let me show you guys.
Just on Overdrive at 2 times, and I was like, it's a little slow.
I know. I used to listen at 1 time speed for like the first 2 or 3 years that I listened to audiobooks. And then I just gradually went up, and now I cannot even listen to 1 time. It is like so slow. Yeah.
But when I listen, because my husband will sometimes put it on like on road trips, he'll put it on in the car, and it just feels like it's going so fast, and I never adjust.
3 times on Libby.
Wow.
How my Libby looks.
Your Libby looks different than my Libby.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah. My Libby doesn't look like that. I don't know why
either.
Is it like by library?
This is what my Libby looks like.
Oh. That's so weird.
Yeah, that's what my Libby looks like.
Are you sure
Oh.
that's Libby?
It's this app.
Maybe it's an update.
Oh, I mean, it's been like this for a while, since I
Oh.
downloaded it.
Oh, okay. No
That's
idea.
weird.
Mine looks like yours, Jessica.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know what you're working with, Lacey.
All right. We can talk about the book.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm looking at all the
We'll
people.
probably be talking about spoilers.
What, you said no spoilers?
Yes, spoilers. We always talk about
Yes,
spoilers.
Oh, spoilers. Let's do it. Now, Jessica, I feel like I saw you post today that you just finished, right?
I did today, yes.
Oh my gosh. So you're like fresh. You're like fresh out of the book. You're going to be asking me things that I don't even remember.
Yeah, right. I had to do a reread today.
Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about it.
I loved it, but that's no surprise because I love the Kingmaker series, so I was super excited.
I never take it for granted. Believe me. Thank you.
I loved how it was a second chance romance and how I want to know how you decided to only give them like the 20% in the past and then the rest their current story. Because I know books will do like 50-50. They'll do like
past, present.
I don't like it when it's 50-50, like 50% in the past and 50% in the present. I think your pacing was great, but I want to know like why you decide that.
Yeah, a lot of people hate, and I don't think of it as a flashback necessarily because it was just the beginning of the book.
Yeah.
I mean, well, there's a prologue. It's hard to explain if you haven't read it. There's a prologue it's literally labeled 2 years before the present. So you have to think, what's that? And then it goes into the past. It goes into what, 1989 or 1988? I can't remember now. But it's or maybe it's 1983. I feel like 80s. No, it was 83. It was 83.
Yes, 37 years ago.
What did you say?
37 years ago?
Yes, it was 80.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people get fatigued by what they perceive as a flashback. Like they perceive like we've been in the past too long and they're kids. And because they were children, and it's not like they were in high school or, there's only so much that I can make feel romantic in that space. So I used it. I felt I wanted to be strategic about building a bond between them, but doing it in a pretty succinct amount of time so that we're here for the romance, so that we start to get to that place where they're mature enough to express love, especially in a physical way. So, because it starts when they are, since we can do spoilers, literally infants. They meet in a bathtub.
The same birthday.
They have the same birthday. They meet in a bathtub, and then I accelerate a little bit, and they're 10 years old, and they're 12 years old, and they're 13 years old. So that was basically it. Was making sure that I gave myself enough time to lay a foundation for their bond that would go on, in the future. But then also making sure that there was a balance so that the romance of it had space to flourish.
So that's why I kind of consider the book more childhood friends to lovers.
I definitely
second chance romance,
Yeah, I call it second chance romance. I call it second chance romance, reunion romance. And since we can curse, I call it childhood friends to grown ass lovers.
That's perfect.
That's my favorite is childhood friends to grown ass lovers. Because when they come back together, they're mature. They're mature. They're like 37 years old. So, yeah. And someone asked me the other day. They were like, "Have you noticed that in so many of your books, there's like a 10-year gap, a 20-year gap? Like, why?" And I was like, "Is there?" They were like, and they knew. They were like, "In Grip, it's 8 years." I was like, "Okay." And in Long Shot, I was like, "I got you. I have a pattern. I get it." And they asked me why I do that. I don't do that on purpose. I don't think, but I like when there's some kind of connection early on, and then later you see what there is that's awesome about that person. But then when you meet them much later, you both had a chance to develop to mature, and you kind of get to fall in love again with this person, building on what you already had. So yeah.
Yeah, because you gave like a separation in All the King's Men too. It was like 4 years, I think.
Don't ask. No, it was more than 4 years.
Oh, it was like the first one was 4 years.
Oh,
the first separation. You had more than one separation.
Ones in that one.
Yeah. And that book actually starts, All the King's Men actually starts when she's like 13. So there's a couple of like things I'm doing with time there. You know, she's 13, then she's 17, then she's like 23. That, you know, so I like to write kind of epically in the sense that I like to cover decades. I like to cover big chunks of their lives and really give the arc of the story, just make it feel like it has breadth to it. Unless it's something like a story like Long Shot. Some people probably haven't read that, but it's a tighter arc. You know, it's like the whole book spans maybe 5 years, somewhere around there, from beginning to like bonus epilogue. But most of my other stories, like even Block Shot, if people have read that, they're in college and then they don't meet again until they're like in their 30s, you know? But
I like that you say Long Shot is a tight, but then you said like 5 years. Because a lot of romances, they're like a couple months only sometimes.
I know. You know what? I just realized that when you said it, that on my scale is because you're usually talking about, when the book starts when you're 13 and it ends when you're 37, or starts when you're born and ends when you're 37. And you know what I think? I think some of that comes from how much I love historical romance, and how a lot of times historical romance covers so much time. It has the potential to do that. A lot of my favorites do that. And maybe that's it, you know, and watching movies like The Thornbirds, you know, when I was growing up, and it's like, oh, she's a child. Wait, she's 40, you know, so.
Would you ever write a historical?
I really don't know about that. I've had people ask me that before. I'm so intimidated by it. One of my really good friends, who I don't know if she wants people to know she's writing historical, but if I called her name, you would know her. But I just don't know if she wants people to know or not. But she was talking about writing historical, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so intimidated. I bow down, because there's so much fact, you know, there's so much research. And my process is fairly research heavy, but in a different way. You know, that's a lot of historical fact. And my process is about 60-40, like about 60%, 50% research, and then 50% typing, you know. But usually it's interviews, which probably comes from journalism and interviewing people and writing freelance and doing stuff like that. I lean really heavily on interviewing, especially if I'm writing outside of my lived experience, or outside of writing for a different ethnic group, writing for anything. Even when I wrote Long Shot, I'd never been abused, you know, and wanting to make sure I understood what that really was. Extensive interviews for that book. That book took me 2 years to write. It was a very intense experience.
Did you do any research for Queen Move, like Ezra's Jewish heritage?
Very much so. Very much so. I have, first of all, my chief Jew was L.J. Shin. I'll tell you, she was the chief Jew in charge. So she was so funny, because she was like, ask me anything. And then she wouldn't know, and she'd go ahead and have to ask her husband and her dad. And they would be like, you're such a bad Jew. How do you not know this? But she knew most of it. But she and I have this running joke, because I would ask her things, and she'd be like, let me go ask my husband. So Lee was definitely critical, and she was an early reader for me. And then I interviewed and just had conversations with several people who were Jewish, including my publisher, because Queen Move is not, unlike most of my books, is not self-published, it's through a small press. And so one of the publishers is Jewish, and she and I had lots of conversations, and a lot of the things from those conversations made it into the book. And when she read the book, she was like, oh my gosh, that's me, I did that, you know? And then the thing about Ezra is he has a unique duality in that he is Black and Jewish. And so I really felt like I needed to talk with someone who was negotiating that unique identity. And the way it happened, I was in Seattle doing something for Amazon. And so they're doing my makeup and all that stuff. And the people who are doing makeup, they know you're an author because you're there for Amazon. And so she goes, what do you write? And I was telling her, and she said, what are you writing now? And I was telling her about Queen Move. And I said, and the hero is, he's Black and Jewish. And I just want to really crawl into that experience. She goes, my best friend's Black and Jewish. I was like, is she? You think she would talk to me? Counts, man. And she was like, yeah. And her name is Sylvia, and she lives in Seattle. And Sylvia and I talked a lot. Sylvia Beta read for me. Sensitivity read for me. And it was so helpful. So helpful. I couldn't have written it without the benefit of her experience. And of course, no group is monolithic. So I wanted to have a good collection, a good cross of experiences, but definitely it was a really good experience for me, and learning a lot about Jewish culture. And then the thing that's unique also about Ezra is not only is Ezra Black and Jewish, he's Black and Jewish in the South in the 80s. And that's a very unique experience too, in Georgia. And in the 90s too. And I was living here in Georgia in the 90s, and it's just a very interesting space. It's an interesting time to be in the South with that particular identity. And I wanted to touch on that some without allowing it to overpower the novel, but I didn't feel like I could neglect that aspect of it, especially after talking with Sylvia, because that's something that Sylvia negotiates. And then I also read a great memoir. I read a lot when I'm writing. I read a great memoir called The Color of Love, which was a young woman who was Black and Jewish, and just talking about her experiences and navigating that duality. So
I didn't realize so much goes into writing contemporary.
Right.
It's like
it does.
But
for me it does. And that's pretty much, I mean, the research for Queen Move was nothing compared to the research for All the King's Men. Those two books, the research was so intense because the heroine was Native American, and her particular tribe, I had about 7 Indigenous women who were reading, and I was interviewing. There's a ceremony, a rite of passage called the Sundance that goes through both books, and those are overseen by a medicine man. I consulted with a medicine man for that practice. I read so many books on climate change and Antarctica. I know so much more about Antarctica than I want to know, and about ships that had actually, crashed into icebergs and had to be rescued. Like, I usually like to try to find factual, historical, actual things that I can model, so that I can be kind of accurate, if that makes sense. So, so there was the climate, and then missing and murdered Indigenous women was an issue in that book. And so I really had to delve into that research. And so that book, I thought, there's no way I'm going to be able to do all this. I started writing that book maybe in November of 2018. Yeah, like November of 2018, and then it didn't publish until October of 2019. Wow. So it was pretty involved.
I love the Antarctica scene in so I read Whiteout by Adriana. Yeah, I recommended that. It was so good.
One of my favorite people. And you know what? She and we were writing at the same time. So we're geeking out and we're talking about wintering over in Antarctica. And we're like, and she's like, oh, no. So what you have to do is this and that. I'm like, oh my gosh. Okay. So now what needs to happen? So she and I were like geeking out about Antarctica and all the facts about Antarctica. And she was like, wait a minute, you're writing Antarctica? And I'm like, you're writing? Who writes Antarctica? So we had the best time, and she's just one of my favorite people. When I was over in Europe last summer, when we could actually travel, I was at a signing in Rome and in London, and then my husband and I went to Paris in between. It was like one Saturday I had London, and the next Saturday I had Rome, and in between we hit Paris. And Adriana lives in France, and she came to Paris to see us, and we had dinner together, and it was just amazing. It was, and she had to like take a train and like stay overnight. Like it was not a small thing for her to come to Paris. So I really, really appreciated it. She's amazing. My husband loved her. He was like, "You have great friends." I do.
Yeah, I still need to read that book. But Kennedy, if you ever wrote like a survival romance, you know, now that you have all this research from Antarctica.
So much more than I ever wanted to know about Antarctica, about samples when you're, you know, doing climate change research in Antarctica, and all kinds of stuff. Yeah, that was really fun. It was one of the hardest books I've ever written, for sure, because of the research, and because I wanted to be really, really careful with how I wrote that heroine who was Native American. I'm not Native American. And the hero is white. And there's such a history of appropriation and such a history of just that relationship between an indigenous or Native American woman as the hero and a white male. Like that has been done really wrong in historical romance especially. And so I was very sensitive to how I handled that and wanted to make sure it was handled well. And I asked my sensitivity readers to please be ruthless about as they were reading. For example, you know how sometimes you'll say a kiss is like savage or something like that, or, you know, when you're talking about alpha males and all that stuff, and you're just writing. And one of my sensitivity readers was like, "I know this is what we say, but the word savage is so charged, even out of that context. I don't think we can use that word." Yeah. You know, and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, you're totally right." You know what I mean? It was just through that lens, I had to be really careful with how I handled that, and making sure that Maxim was treating her all the time, even though he's growly and possessive and like hypersexual. I think that's really what, if anyone has read that book, they know that Lennox is an alpha female, you know, and I really needed her to be that. I needed there to be an equity between them as much as possible, and for her to be really strong and asserting her independence. You know what I mean?
Did you know you were going to write Kimba's story, you know, as soon as she showed up on the page, or?
Well, you know what? When she showed up on the page, as I wrote her, I realized she's a very compelling figure, you know, and I knew that I sensed that as I was writing her, that she was someone readers were going to want more from. And I started planting seeds for myself in how I would get to her, and talking about her father. You know, I talked about in All the King's Men about her father passing away. And there's one scene where she's twisting this ring on her thumb that shows up later in, you know, in Queen Move. So little things that I kind of planted there, like these are things I can come back to if I decide that I'm going to write this. And this is with a small press. I wasn't sure how I was going to do it. All the King's Men had just come out when Blue Box, the small press this is printed through, approached me and asked me. Liz Berry, who is the publisher, sent me an email, and it said something like "fangirl" or something. And I opened it, and I was like, she was just gushing about All the King's Men and how obsessed she was. And I was just like, is this actually happening? Like, you know, you don't expect a publisher, you know, to email you like that. And then she just said, you know, "I would love to talk with you about you writing for this new line we have," because they're the same people who do 1001 Dark Nights. But Blue Box, those are novellas. Blue Box is a new thrust that every time I say the word thrust in the the word thrust has been ruined for me, because
pretty much.
I can ever say it without thinking about something that's very sexual. But anyway, I discursed. But she was like, you know, we have this new line of full-length novels, and we're gonna debut it, over the next few months. And she was like, do you have anything, that you would like to write, maybe even extending this series? And that's when, I realized Kimba was the right story. And I have people who ask me about Millie too, about Millicent, and her journey is very interesting to me. As big spoiler alerts, what happened with her. I don't know that for people if they haven't read, but yeah. So I guess I did know, she was compelling to me from the beginning. And when I started getting into her story, what I didn't know was who her hero was. I didn't really know that it was going to be a childhood romance. One thing that was interesting for me with their dynamic is because she is such a powerful personality, everyone, I think, or a lot of people assumed her guy is going to have to be like a president, a senator, a, mogul, because that's power. And he's an educator, and I think that I really wanted to model a man who is completely secure in himself, secure enough to be with a woman that powerful, who probably makes, he's doing well, but who probably makes more money than he does, who has a more high profile career than he does. And for him to be completely invested in, her success and seeing her soar and being a safe place for her to land. And another thing I really wanted to model with Ezra that I don't think I see enough. We sometimes in romance cross that line to me. Sometimes, not everybody, not all the time, but there's sometimes I've been reading, I'm like, oh, this smells a little bit like male toxicity. I'm not sure about this. And I really wanted to model somebody who has the strength, and who is very secure in himself. But we see him with his son, and he's very tender with his son. He's very nurturing. He's involved in the details, like making sure he takes his vitamins and, doesn't eat more than one dessert. And, and especially because Ezra is a person of color, we don't see that enough with Black men, with brown men. We don't see those images of them as nurturing fathers enough. And that was something I wanted to model in this story.
We have a comment about, this is gonna be spoilery, about the pregnancy.
Okay.
With his ex.
Yes.
And I typically don't like surprise pregnancy tropes, but I don't like it because they're used to kind of add drama, but it's always like, oh, it's not his baby. So I actually liked that it was his baby, so it wasn't just there to add drama and then like, oh, it's not mine, so we're gonna be fine. Like it was his, so like what are we going to do?
That's a whole discussion, and I don't know what their comment was, but they just want me to talk about it.
They said, why'd you do it? Because it emotionally hurt me for Kimba.
Yes, I know. And I had a lot of people message me, no, I'm so hurt for Kimba. And I was like, well, yeah, that's the point, but I think that when I was brainstorming this with a friend, an author friend, and there's several things I wanted to do in this story. One of them was modeling modern blended families. And how, because that's typical. It's as typical as the traditional family unit is an quote unquote alternative or blended family unit. And so I wanted to really hone in on that, and found family. Like those are two things that I really wanted to camp on. And so I was talking with my friend and I was like, yeah, I think that she's going to get pregnant. Also, a way to really like expand those emotions is when you have a point of tension, which is Kimba. And since we're spoiling, Kimba's in perimenopause. And so she's a career woman who hasn't really been concerned very much about having children. And then she realizes, okay, I have a very small window to do this. A counterpoint of like pain, what would be most painful is if I'm not sure I can ever have children, and then the man I'm in love with is having a child with someone else. And so that was part of how I kind of sometimes put like, okay, this hurts. What would make it hurt the most? Do you know what I mean? And so when you kind of put those two, like what's the worst case scenario? What's going to magnify this emotion? And that was that. Also, when I was talking with my friends and I was like, yeah, and I think she's going to get pregnant. She goes, okay, how are you going to resolve it? Is it going to be a miscarriage? Is it gonna that's not going to be his baby? It's going to be a false alarm. And I said, I think she's just going to have it. She's like, you can't do that. She said, you can't do that. And I was like, oh, she said, you can't do that. Romance readers won't like that.
I know.
Mm-hmm.
I do a lot of shit that romance readers it's like, this is what she does. So yeah, and also I like my stories to be real. You know what I mean? Most of the time, if you're dating a man and his ex-girlfriend gets pregnant, most of the time it's his. You know, I mean, like that close. And most of the time, if she's not going to choose to terminate that pregnancy, she has the baby, you know? And so that's really what would happen in real life. And I like real life. You know, it hurts. And it's that balance of fantasy and real life for me that makes it interesting. Sorry. Sorry. I mean, it did hurt. I know, you know, because I got lots of messages about how much people were hurting for Kimba. And I get that. And I think I also wanted to put Kimba in a position where I think so many times as women, we don't really count the cost of, or if we do count the cost, we put ourselves second, or we don't really assess what is it going to take for me to get done what I need to do? Like, what is it going to take for me to accomplish my goals? And Kimba realized I don't have the emotional capacity, because she was trying to do something historic. You know, she's trying to get this, you know, the first Hispanic governor of this state elected. And she's already fighting a lot of biases, and she's negotiating a male-dominated world. And it's a real strain. She's already negotiating all of that. And she's like, you know, I don't know. And the perimenopause. Mm-hmm. And she goes into the process of like freezing her eggs and all of that stuff. And she has a realistic assessment to say, I don't know that I have the emotional capacity to go through all of this to accomplish what I need to accomplish in this moment, which has the potential to be historic, and still do this, like, and still watch you walk through this with her. And I don't expect that you would abandon her, but I just can't be a part of that. So, yeah, I mean, it all worked out, but
yeah.
You know, I think there's something in a woman who recognizes her own emotional capacity and what she needs for herself to accomplish what she needs to accomplish.
That's why I really liked that she took a step back and gave themselves a break.
Yeah.
Like, she wouldn't be able to handle it. She knew what she needed to do.
I wouldn't have been able to handle it. I mean, you know, it's a lot. It was a lot. And she was up against a lot. She knew that it was going to be one of the most difficult elections of her career, which it was. And it was a lot and she didn't need to be distracted, you know, by her own emotions in a lot of ways. And so, and we knew by that time, I hope by that time readers knew Ezra, you know, and they could see what a good man he was, and understanding that he would not abandon someone who was his friend. You know, she is the mother of his child, but she's also his friend, and they've known each other a really long time. And they had seen him as a father enough to know that he would never shirk that responsibility, you know?
Mm-hmm.
There's also another twist towards the end with the mothers. I actually saw that coming. I was wondering. Too. Yeah, like
yeah.
Yeah, I was first wondering, was it the dad and the mom? And then no, it had to be the mothers. So why did you decide to do that?
Because I felt like, you know, I started looking at because obviously her family is a very storied family, legendary as far as like civil rights and all of that stuff. And so you start looking at those actual families as models, you know, like the John Lewises, like the, you know, the obviously the Kings, the, you know, all the different families. And I live here in Atlanta. So those all the streets are named after them. And when you drive through the city of Atlanta, John Lewis is on the sides, his face is painted on the sides of buildings, and Martin Luther King, you know, it's like Abernathy Road, you know, this city bleeds, that's probably not the right word, but this city is just so full of them. They've stamped themselves here. And so I wanted her to be from a family that's like that, where, you know, you're going to the school there's a school up the street. The exit that I live off is named after Maynard Jackson. You know, the high schools, who was, of course, the Atlanta mayor, who is in the book. So it's just so much. There's so much history. There's so much of that in the book. And so I started looking at those families as models. And you guys may not remember, but like in the 90s, these biographies, these stories about Martin Luther King Jr. started coming out, about his infidelity. And there was this huge uproar, you know, about him being unfaithful and all of that. And so I started thinking about, what if there was something like that? And really her having to reconcile him, because that's what we have to do, is reconcile that, you know, MLK was this amazing figure who was an orator, who was, you know, won the Nobel Prize, who was all of those things, but still human and fallible. And so I started really, because she's such a daddy's girl, that was something that I wanted her to have to navigate. But as I was doing it, it felt predictable. Do you know what I'm saying? It felt like it was so modeled after what happened a lot in real life that I just wanted to kind of turn it on its head a little bit. And I didn't want to do what's been done all the time. So it was just kind of a small twist, but it would have had, especially in that time, even more impact than if he had cheated with, you know, his mother. For the two women to have been in a relationship would have been, in a lot of ways, more, you know, would have been more damaging for their families at that time in history, you know?
And with Kimba's character, so Lacey just tweeted about a book she was reading, how the heroine was celibate for 18 years waiting for the guy, and how she hates that. And I agree. I really liked how Kimba was the one who had more.
Oh yeah.
Beforehand,
I have no idea.
Guilty.
Like 8. You know, it's like, good grief. That is a single digit. I think she says that's such a single digit number. And she doesn't know how many partners she's had. And I really wanted her to have that without there being any slut shame and without her having any shame over it. You know, she's like, I like sex, you know, and I'm responsible and I'm honest, but I like it, you know. And he has been in a committed relationship for 10 years. So it makes sense that his number would be so much lower, since she's really never in a committed relationship. She's been very hyper focused on her dreams and her goals, but she still likes, you know, to get it on. So yeah. And you know, it's interesting because in contrast, if you remember, for those who have read All the King's Men, I really wanted to kind of paint an even, like a balance, because if you remember, Lennox was a virgin, you know, and she was very deliberate and intentional about it. She was basically like, this is my body and I don't want to lose my virginity. I want to be intentional about who's going to have it. And that really connected to how she felt her body involved in the Sundance ceremony and the intentionality of it and wanting that to carry through her life. So, and that both are okay. You know what I mean? It's like, I'm not going to tell you what to do with your body. So.
Yeah, someone said, I want to be your last. Was
So romantic.
So swoony. Ezra, you know what? One of my beta readers was like, I think you wrote a cinnamon roll. Did I? Because I don't think I ever have. And he, you know, she was like, one of my early readers was like, is Ezra too beta? And I was like, I don't know if Ezra's beta.
I wouldn't call him beta.
But I think that he is a little cinnamon rolling. But he's also in the bedroom. I think he's very assertive, you know, very much. But so is Kimba, you know. Kimba is master of her own pleasure. More work than one, so yeah.
Was their first kiss on the trampoline? As adults?
Their first kiss, of course, as adults, was on the trampoline. Yes,
okay.
And I get more tweets and messages about that trampoline scene than anything. I mean, some people just tweet me trampoline. Yeah, trampoline.
Yeah, it's a memorable scene, not just because of the trampoline part.
Yes. And it's so funny because their very first kiss, of course, is like when they're kids, and it's a different dynamic. I wanted to handle it very carefully because they're so young. And so I'm asking everybody, when did you have your first kiss? I'm asking my husband, asking my friends, when did you have your first kiss? What was it like? Because I didn't have my first kiss till I was in maybe like 10th grade. 11th grade, and I was talking with Lee, and she was like, yeah, I think I was in 10th grade too, but then I caught up really fast. I was like, yeah, I can see that. Mom was like 10th grade. My husband was like 5th grade. I was like, 5th grade? I was still playing with Barbies. What in the world?
Oh my God.
I was still playing with Barbies. And but most people I talked to were like 7th grade, 8th grade. And so they're 8th grade and kind of on the cusp of high school. And just kind of that sweet, innocent unsureness is what I really wanted to infuse that scene with. And then it's set in such a specific time. There's like Mariah Carey's, Vision of Love playing in the background. And her friend Mona has like an asymmetrical haircut. And, and at one point, I loved writing the 80s and the 90s. At one point, Ezra's walking and has like a Walkman on his belt. It's just, and he's listening to Outkast, when the album had just come out. It was just, there's so much that flavored that time, and specifically in Atlanta. And I wanted to give that sense. And so when you ask about the trampoline, I talked about my research process. I don't write until later in the process. So a lot of my friends, when they say it's time to write a new book, most of my friends, when they say it's time to write a new book, they sit down and they start typing. And I'm like, I can't do that. Usually there's a lot I have to research because I have to read my memoirs and I have to interview 12 people and I have to, go digging around in Antarctica. So I can't sit down and write what I don't know. There's no way I could have sat down to write The Kingmaker with all of the detail it took to write a scene like the Antarctica chapters. I had to learn all of that. I had to process all of that. And so that's what the first part of my process is. But also, I'm really, really big on music. Like, I'm a musician, I'm a singer, and music feeds my imagination. And so a lot of times I have like a Spotify playlist for each book. Each Spotify playlist is at least 50 songs. Some of them are like, I think the Grip playlist is like 80 songs, Music is just very important to my process. It's very informative. And so a song came on, I was curating the list because I curate the list before I start writing. And usually it's just that a song feels like the book. Sometimes it connects with the plot point. Sometimes it just makes me think of the characters. This song called Trampoline came on. And I was like, oh my gosh. And I listened to that song like all day. I don't even remember who it's by, but it's on the playlist. The Trampoline song is on. It's what's his name? Who used to be in the Harry Styles group?
Liam.
Not Liam.
Niall.
Zane.
He has dark hair. He's the one. He has really dark hair.
Zane.
Yes, it's his song.
Oh.
Him, and I can't remember the girl, but it's on the playlist. And the song, it goes, I've been having dreams. And then they start, it's like jumping on a trampoline.
Okay, that sounds familiar now.
I have no idea why, as soon as I heard that song, it just stuck. And I was like, oh yeah, we're going to work this trampoline. No, why? But I listened to that song like all day, like on repeat. And it kind of starts painting images in my head. Music paints images in my head, and I could just see them jumping on the trampoline. and I could see them, you know, kissing in the nets, and I could just see it all. And I was like, this is gonna be fun, you know. And I literally, it's the thing that most people say to me about the book. It's like with each book, there's something. Like with Long Shot, people will just tweet me and go, hopscotch, you know, for anybody who's read that book, they'll just go, hopscotch. And that lets me know exactly where they are in the book. Like if they say hopscotch, it's also this huge, deep breath of relief. Like with Grip, they'll say to me, you know, we all bruise, or they'll say, you know, there's just different kind of touchstones for each book. And this one is definitely trampoline. I mean, you know, which I love. I love that.
So a lot of people asked us to ask you if Mona is gonna be getting her own story, because a lot of people love Mona.
No. And you know what? So many people message me, you know, where's Mona's book? But then a lot of people also message me, Mona's getting on my nerves. Like, it's the camp is split because they're like, why is she cock blocking? Mona's cock blocking, you know? And I'm like, but she's their friend. I don't care. They can be grinding and she's cock blocking. I think that I may, like, there is a novella that I have to write next year. And I've been thinking about Mona or Millie, you know, like in that same world. Because Millie has a very interesting story to tell too, with all that she's been through. And then of course, Mona, you know, I could write either. I could write both. But I have had a lot of people asking about Mona. And I think Mona has an interesting, especially the scene where they're drinking wine right before they kiss in the rain, like in his garden. That scene, I think, is where you kind of crack Mona open a little bit and you find out her husband was unfaithful and, you know, that she's lonely in a lot of ways, that sometimes we're lonely just wanting to have somebody hold your hand, just wanting to wake up with somebody else in the bed, you know, just those kind of grounding touch points. When she kind of unpacked that, I think a lot of the people who were like, cock blocker, were like, oh, Mona.
I appreciated her because she was friends with both of them.
Yeah, she cared about both of them.
So
yeah, and she was honest. Like, I feel like if you're a friend, like objectively, she was like, you're gonna get hurt. You know, like if things go south, you're gonna be the one to get hurt. They have a kid together. They're just, I mean, it's reason. You know, it's rational. They just got out of a relationship. They're still living together. They have a kid together. You could get hurt.
Yeah, and everyone needs a Mona in their life.
Everyone needs a Mona, you know? And I love how at one point Kimba says something like, I know Mona's telling me that I shouldn't go over there or something, but we both know I am, you know, or we both know I will. It's when he comes home early from New York and she goes over and, you know, they start kissing in his garden, which is I love that scene too. Yeah.
You also wrote another novella for one of the side characters in All the King's Men, right? Yes. I don't remember his name.
Grim.
Oh,
Grim.
Yeah.
Yes. So Grim is not in this book. We don't refer to him in this book, but he's in all throughout the first two books. Because it's all, even though this stands alone, and I was very deliberate in writing it so it could stand alone, so that readers who were coming in wouldn't have to feel like they had to read those first two books. But at the same time, readers who would feel a sense of connection. So Grimm is in the first two books. And there was an anthology we did last year, a holiday anthology called Christmas in the City. And we got paired with different writers. And so like some of them are people who write together all the time, like Corinne Michaels and Melanie Harlow, or like Vi Keelan and Penelope Ward. But then you have these odd pairings like LJ Shin and Helena Hunting. And you're like, whoa, where'd that come from? And so I was in that group and I had to be paired with somebody who doesn't already have a regular writing partner. And so Sierra Simone and I were these loose ends. And I was like, please don't let me have to write with Sierra Simone. Please don't let me have to write with Sierra Simone. You know, I'm like, I can't write with Sierra Simone because she is like, I mean, you know, that's how I feel about Sierra Simone. And so I was like, oh my gosh, please, I can't draw this. I can't draw this straw. I can't draw this straw. And when you know it, I had to write with Sierra Simone. And so we wrote a story called The Christmas Crown, which has Lennox and Maxim are in it, but it's Grimm. It's Grimm's story with his little queen. And it's a short story, but we are expanding it to a novella. So it's right now just about, I don't know, 50 pages. I don't know how long it is, but it's a short story. And so we are expanding it into a novella called The Killer and the Queen, which is coming later this year. And I mean, I'm so intimidated about writing with Sierra Simone. And then when we opened a Google Doc and she started writing, and then I started writing, and I mean, literally by the end of it, she was like, "Did you write that?" And I was like, "I have no idea, baby." And we just seem, and I think we think a lot alike. You know, our writing styles are different, but both of us have a real fixation on language and on unusual turns of phrase, very much like a more lyrical style. And so we just meshed, you know? So yeah, so that'll be coming later this year. I'm really, really excited about it, actually.
Is that what you're currently working on?
No. Right now I am developing a 3-book series that it may be traditionally published if anybody's even interested. I don't know if I'll be able to even find a traditional publisher who wants me. But that centers around 3 friends. And really, I love writing embattled couples. I love reading divorced couples. I love reading separated couples. I love reading married couples, you know, who have really gone through something. Because so often in romance, the whole goal is for them to get together and to have the happily ever after. And I really like exploring something where the point is not that. Like a lot of people are like, why don't you have weddings at the end of your books? You know, because a lot of my books don't end in a wedding, you know? And what I'll usually do is do those in bonus epilogues, because I usually do bonus epilogues. But a lot of times my books, they end up in there together. They might even be engaged, but I don't necessarily have a wedding or a marriage at the end of the book, because for me, that's not always the point. You know, the journey is the point, and then being together is the point, but not necessarily that a wedding is the happily ever after. And even when you look at like the Grip series, and still they get, spoiler, and still they get married at like 30%. You know, it's like marriage can't be the whole point because there's 70% more book left. So the series that I'm working on now is basically 3 embattled married couples. I know it sounds like a lot of fun, but that's going to be really exciting for me. One of the couples is divorced, and just kind of their journey, and you know, I'm going to have fun with the complexities of marriage and the trials of marriage. And I also really like writing mature characters. You know, these characters are in their late 30s. By the end of the duet, Maxim's 40. You know, that's interesting to me. You know, not just that, because even if you look at like Grip, you know, they meet each other when they're like college age. But by the end of it, they're almost 40 years old. Again, I write these stories, but and then I am working on something that I think will publish in November by the end of the year. It takes me a long time to write books. Like my books are long, and so I think the average romance novel is like 80,000. I haven't written a book under like 120,000. Long shots 130,000, block shots 125,000. You know, all the Grip, you know, the Grip books are 125,000. So I just write longer, and it takes me longer to write them. So I'm hoping by November, and it's a Hollywood story. But no, don't do that. Every time I say Hollywood story, people are like, Hollywood. And I'm like, or like our broken justice system, you know, and Hollywood. It's like mass incarceration and Hollywood. You know, that's kind of how I approach a Hollywood story. Most of my books have this thread of activism that runs through them. And I don't want it to be super heavy or like to overpower the romance, But for me, like that's something that's really important to me, you know. So you see it a lot in what I write. Not all the time, but a lot.
So are the married couples ones kind of like second chance romances?
I would say one of them is.
Mm-hmm.
I can't say too much because my agent will kill me. But people are like, "What are you doing? Why are you talking about this?" Because I have no filter. I think one of them is definitely will be categorized as a second chance. The other two, not so much. Not, they're a little more complicated than kind of like fitting into that trope, you know. But the divorced couple, I can definitely say would be like a second chance for sure. Yeah.
Oh, I was thinking while you were talking about epilogues, me and Jess have this little like thing where she does not like epilogues, but I almost need them.
No.
Do you like epilogues, like writing them or reading them?
Yeah, I like a good epilogue. I mean, it depends on where I'm left in the story. When I think about the epilogues, because not only do I write an epilogue, I write bonus epilogues, you know, and they're like 50 pages. You know, the bonus epilogue is like 2 more chapters from each character's point of view. I'm very deliberate about that bonus epilogue. It takes time. Like everybody's messaging me, where's the bonus epilogue for Queen Move? And I'm like, I don't just shit it out. It takes time. It's 50 pages, people. You know.
I mean, I'll admit, I was that person waiting on the bonus epilogues for All the King's Men. I was
All the King's Men was an abuse of power. Like, I should not have held you guys hostage that long. I had every intention of having that bonus epilogue done before I started writing Queen Move. And then when writing Queen Move was probably the hardest experience of my writing career, not because the book itself was so hard, but my identity was stolen. We were moving from Charlotte to North Carolina, Charlotte to Atlanta in the middle of it. My identity was stolen bad. Like the state of North Carolina was like, we need you in court for for unemployment fraud because someone was using my social security number to collect unemployment. The IRS was like, you can't buy a house because you have not filed taxes for your business in Utah. And I was like, Utah? I've never been to Utah. You guys are not going to believe this. It's like my information was leaked. It was so pervasive. It wasn't just one thing. It was all over. This guy, oh my gosh, you guys, this guy called me. He knew my birthday. He knew my social security number. He knew all of that. He told me he was with the DEA. And he said that I'm ashamed to tell you this because it was such a scam, but it was in the middle of everything. And he goes, he said, yeah, we're coming to your house tomorrow because someone has opened accounts, something like 20 accounts in your name. And when you guys hear this part, you're just going to laugh. There's a car was found at the border of Mexico with a dead body in the trunk, and the car was registered to your name.
That's like movie stuff.
I
know.
He knew everything about me. He knew my maiden name. He knew my social security. And I was like, hey, how would he know all of this if he wasn't legit? He's like, so we know it's not you. We know that it's not you. It's a cartel. It's a Mexican cartel. That's what he said to me. I was like, a Mexican cartel? I have a deadline. I'm writing Queen Move. I'm writing. I'm on a deadline. I don't have time for this. And so then when my identity was stolen, it threw off everything with us selling and buying our house. And so we had sold our house and the new family had to move into our house. We had to leave, even though we weren't able to move into ours. We were in an Airbnb for 8 weeks in Atlanta.
Oh my gosh.
The whole time I was writing the book, we were in an Airbnb. And, you know, my son has autism, and so he makes noises. There's noises that he makes sometimes. And the first Airbnb we were in, the neighbors started complaining about the noises he made, and they asked us to leave. And in the middle of all this, we had to find another Airbnb here. I mean, it was just like everything that could go wrong was going wrong. And I remember just sitting in the borrowed bedroom of an Airbnb against the wall and just sobbing because I was like, I can't take this anymore. How am I supposed to write this book? Like, how am I supposed to write this book? And I have such good alpha readers, you know, even before, because I have a couple of phases. I have an alpha reader, I have beta readers, I have sensitivity readers. You know, I have checks and balances kind of throughout, especially when I'm writing other cultures. But my alpha reader, Joanna, who reads everything I write, even bonus epilogue. I won't even put out a bonus epilogue without Joanna reading it. And her and then one of my publicists, Tia, both read it. And they love me, but they were like, my publicist said, it doesn't feel like a Kennedy Ryan novel yet. And I was like, I can't write a Kennedy Ryan novel because, oh, yes, how can I write a Kennedy Ryan novel? Whatever that is, I cannot do it. And they just really helped me. You know, they were like, no, it's there. You just have to, you know, I ended up writing. They told me that in a week, I added 15,000 words in 1 week based on their feedback to flesh the book out. You know what I mean? And there are so many scenes that are like people's like favorite scenes that were not there until they were like, no, you have to go back and you have to do it again. You have to add this. You have to add that. And I was in such a difficult place in my personal life. And then, of course, we moved in the middle of the pandemic. So we moved from North Carolina. The weekend we moved to Atlanta, the city shut down. And so we were trapped in this strange Airbnb where the neighbors were complaining. And, you know, we didn't have food. You know how people stock up? We didn't have any of that, you know. My son was supposed to start with a school. They froze admissions. So he was just there. You know, I was like, I can't work under these conditions. So the fact that I got the book done at all just feels like a miracle, honestly. It really does. It really, really does. And then for it to, you know, hit USA Today, the first and I mean, and then it was in Oprah last week. And I was just like, what is even happening with this book that was just impossible, you know? And so it's made it that much sweeter for me that it's had this kind of reception and that it's doing what it's doing because it felt impossible. You know, there were days where I felt like this just won't happen, you know? So that's been very rewarding.
That's crazy. I did not expect to hear all of that.
People did not know what was going on, you know? It was hard. Like I posted like in my group, you know, I was like, can you guys pray for me or light candles or whatever you do? I don't care what you do. Throw salt over your shoulders. I don't care. Do it. I am like in a warfare over here. And my husband at one point was even like, can you push it back? And I was like, no, I can't, you know, because if I had been self-publishing it, I probably would have pushed it back because it was so much. But because I was writing it, you know, for a publisher, I could have asked for more time, but I didn't want to. We had said it was going to come out when it did. And then, of course, it came out in the middle of so much upheaval, you know, around race, you know, and this book is so unapologetically, authentically, you know, connected to their communities, to marginalized communities. And I was like, who puts out a book, you know, in the middle of something like this? It just felt like, who cares? Do you know what I mean? It was hard for me to care because all I cared about was what was happening in our country. But so many people messaged me and were like, this book was exactly what I needed. I needed this, you know, right now. And I felt affirmed seeing people who look like me and seeing that, you know, those different cultures celebrated. Mm-hmm. When in a lot of ways in our country, that was not being affirmed. And so the timing is what it is, you know?
Yeah, a lot of people are talking about how we need Black love stories and not all the pain they experience, but then being happy. So yes, that was definitely a Queen move.
Yes, and I was very deliberate. Somebody said, "Get my laugh." I know, it's so loud. I was very deliberate. Something really impacted me because my books are hard books a lot of times. Not hard. Yeah, hard. Some of them are hard or difficult books. Like the emotional journey. They tend to be, they're not rom-coms. They are opposite of rom-coms. And I will never write a rom-com probably because I'm just not funny. Like on the page, I'm not funny. I think humor is so hard. I really do. I think it's harder than just being emotional or just being sexy. Like smart funny is like a gift. And I don't have that gift. And so I was listening to, or I was reading Robin Lee, whom I adore. Robin Lee wrote a piece about, and she called it Black Joy, and she was talking about how she was watching a movie, Little Women, the new Little Women. Mm-hmm. And it's set at a time where you're not going to see a whole bunch of Black people possibly at this time, in this era, in this movie. And she's thinking, I'm not going to see it. This is a great movie, but I would really love to see myself right about now. Anybody who looks like me. And then this Black woman, they're in the middle of a dance. I haven't seen it, but I don't know if it's some kind of dance. And this Black woman dances into it's just like quick. And she has this huge smile on her face. And she's just loving the music and she's dancing. And there's so much joy. And she talked about the power of seeing Black people joyful. And I really that impacted me. And I took that into this book. And when I was thinking about the trampoline scene, I know we keep talking about the trampoline. I was like, what is more joyful than like two grown folks jumping on this trampoline like there's not a care in the world, and then having like really heavy petting? So I was like, it gets no more joyful than that. Yeah. I jumped and I had an orgasm. Hello. Set win column. So I really took that into this book, is wanting to show that, wanting to show people of color in love and in joy, not in struggle. And there is struggle because there's emotional struggle, but it's not struggle a lot of times in the way people predict it in stories that reflect marginalized groups, whether it's Black, whether it's Native American, whether it's Asian American, whatever it is, that those historic experiences in this country somehow have to weight down every story. I'd break the trampoline. Gotta get a trampoline. Yes. These are great.
Someone on Instagram asked, what age did you know that writing was going to be your career? Did you ever have any doubts?
I started writing poetry pretty young. Poetry is where I first started writing, and poetry is still in my writing. Sometimes I'm writing sentences and I find myself building iambic, like pentameter because when I write, I listen for a cadence. Sometimes when I write, I find myself changing words until they have the phrase has a certain cadence. So if you were to read it out loud, it almost sounds like it has that rhythm to it. And so that poetry piece is always, I still love poetry. So I started writing poetry really, really young. And by the time I was 17, I was writing for my local newspaper. And I knew that I was going to go to school for journalism. And I knew that I was going to write. But I didn't know it was going to be fiction. Fiction came later. I thought that I was going to be a journalist, whatever capacity that was going to be in. And that was going to be how I wrote. I didn't know. I thought it was going to be true stories, And I signed a book deal when I was 40, so it came to me really late, relatively late, because I see, much younger people like, I'm 22 and I just signed my first book deal. And I was like, I'm 40. My first book deal, and I had no idea that I was going to end up, most people who publish that way, who start traditionally, they have this series of rejection letters, and I didn't have any of that. I just stumbled into it. which is in some ways not easy because you don't know anything. You know, you get thrust into a situation that you're really, really appreciative of, but you don't have the experience to really understand what the industry is about or how not to be taken advantage of or what not to settle for or what to demand. And that's kind of the situation I found myself in, you know. I literally pitched to one editor and she was like, I want to buy your book. And I was like, oh my gosh, thank you. You know, and I didn't, you know, I'm just like, oh my gosh, somebody wants me. You know? And now I've learned a lot. You have to learn a lot about your worth, you know. You have to figure out what am I worth. And I think that self-publishing does that for a lot of people. Because I would probably publish again traditionally. I don't have to. You know, I don't have to wait for somebody to tell me that I'm good enough. I just know that I am, you know, and I'm going to work hard to make sure that my books are good enough, whatever that means. Not that everybody will like them, but they'll be, you know, excellent in their own way. So.
I do agree with Stella. She just said she enjoyed that Kimba wasn't skinny. I recently did a video about wanting more heroines who have bodies and aren't just all super skinny. So I appreciated that too.
Yes. And a lot of people will write me about Banner from Blockshot because Banner from Blockshot was a 4-figure heroine too. So I like that. I like realistic bodies. I mean, I have some bodies that are small and slim because they're slim women too. Mm-hmm. But I also have, you know, heroines who are, you know, double digit. Banner calls herself a double digit girl, you know, so she's a double digit girl.
And with all the research you do, have you ever had to scrap the idea for a book?
Oh gosh, I came really, really close. I've told this story a couple of times. I can't remember who I've told it to, but with All the King's Men, you know, I told you guys that I was writing about the Sundance, about that rite of passage that so many Native American tribes have for young girls around the age of 13, and they're overseen by a medicine man. And those in the 1800s, late 1800s, mid 1800s, the U.S. government outlawed them. That's basically the U.S. government doing what the U.S. government does, basically trying to strip Native Americans of their culture, you know, anglicizing them. And they were even forbidden to even speak their own language. And that's why for so many tribes, you don't get me started because all my research coming out, but for so many tribes, those languages are dying because for so long they weren't even allowed to speak those languages. And so that practice was sacred to them and it went underground. And they were completely protective of it. And it was completely a secret because if you were found performing that rite of passage, you would go to prison, fully fined. And so for years, while that law was on the books, it was underground. And then wisely, finally, they struck that law and those ceremonies could come back above ground. But a lot of people still kept it secret because it was so scary that they might go to prison, that whatever. And now you can literally go to YouTube. Like I was watching those ceremonies on YouTube, you know, but it used to be such a secret and so sacred. And so when I had told you I had several sensitivity readers who were Native American, at least 2 of them from Lennox's specific tribe in Arizona. I wanted to be real specific with that. And so one of them was like, my grandfather says you can't write that. And I was like, what do you mean? Because that ceremony goes throughout the entire, you know, throughout both books. Mm-hmm. And she goes, yeah, he says that you don't have the right to write that because you're not Native American. I completely understand that perspective. And he had seen so many writers appropriate those customs and in a bad way and reiterate painful stereotypes and do so much harm. And he assumed that's what I was doing. And so I was like, you have to put your money where your mouth is. Because for me, I always say if I'm writing someone else's experience, I have to lead with listening. You know, you go in interrogating all of your own biases. You go in assuming that you know nothing and that you are teachable. Do you know what I mean? They're teaching you. And so I know what it's like to have a writer do harm, you know, write something that's harmful, that's painful, that's stereotypical about people who look like you. And then when you try to point it out, you're dismissed, like you're overreacting. And my first knee-jerk reaction was, he's overreacting. And then I was like, oh, wait a minute. Like, that's what people have said to me before. I'm not going to dismiss him. And I called my publicist and I said, we may have to scrap this. And she was like, whoa, no. We had just done the cover reveal in Entertainment Weekly. She was like, we did a cover reveal in Entertainment Weekly. No way we're scrapping this. And I was like, well, we may have to delay it because I may have to rewrite this whole thing. And she was like, please ask him, if they've read it. And he hadn't read it. And she asked him to read the sections that pertain to the Sundance. And I'm just holding my breath all day, waiting to tell my publicist whether or not we could publish this book in 2 weeks. And she just sent me a text and said, he says it's great. I was like,
freaked out over nothing.
Oh my God. Because he said she can't write this. And she said, he said you handled it really well and you did good. And I was like, thank you. Oh my gosh. But I felt like my conviction was tested, because it's like, do you mean it when you say that? Like, do you mean it when you say, that you're teachable and that you lead with listening and that you respect that group's experience to the point where if they say that this will be harmful, you would pull it? Do you mean that? So I felt like it was a test, honestly. And I felt good that I was prepared to do that if necessary, although it would have been painful. And I could not even function until I corrected him, because it was 2 books that I would have had to just completely restructure.
Mm-hmm.
We have a couple questions in the comments. Izzy asked, will you write or do you want to write another romance in another subgenre? I think we answered that, right?
Well, we talked about historical. If I write something different, it would be women's fiction. That's probably where I would go next, would be women's fiction, as opposed to a different sci-fi or paranormal or, I would probably, or historical, I would probably just write women's fiction. Are the Bennett series good? I think so. Are. You know what I'll say about the Bennett series is it's very different than a lot of my later work, because it's my debut series and it was a trad series. And then they were really putting emphasis on writing in third person, which a lot of trad stuff is still third person. And so everything I write now is first person present, which is very different. So the Bennett series is third person, which some people have trouble with, but I love it, And the first book, when I told you I got a book deal and I submitted it, I didn't know anything. I didn't know that romances were 80,000 words. Mine was 250,000. And it was 250,000 words. And they were like, this is a little long. We're going to split it into 2 books. And so it was a built-in cliffhanger, because the first book was just half of the book, because I had written a mammoth tomb, of course. It's like, okay, it's like 4 times what it should be. And so that's something to know about the Bennett series, is the first book is a cliffhanger because of that. The first 3 books are written in third person. So if you're not into third person, it might be something to get used to. And I had to really train myself, because when I started self-publishing, I knew that the indie reading market was more geared toward first person. And so that's when I realized that I was going to self-publish and indie publish, I wanted to train myself to write first person. And to do it, I took a third person novel that I had written and I rewrote the whole thing in first person. Oh I know, I'm exhausting. Do you see? I'm exhausting. And I rewrote the whole book in first person to feel the difference. I'm listening to myself to feel the difference, because it's not just changing the pronouns. It's where you are, how you write, because you are inside a character's head it's different. It's just different. And I had to feel that difference. So I rewrote one of my third person books into a first person book. It was literally like 130,000 words. So But the Bennett series is very complicated, and it's very emotional,
very dramatic.
It is, and it's kind of like a family saga. You know, it's like there's a lot of family elements to it. That there's a lot more going on than the romance itself. That is, you know, connected to family members.
Yeah, that series was my first book from you.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
The interesting thing about that book, that series, is I started self-publishing. It was a 4-book deal. Between book 3 and book 4, I started self-publishing, and so that's when I started writing first person. And I had to get special permission from them to write. I loved writing first person so much. This is very unusual. The first 3 books in the series are third person, and the 4th book is first. Because I loved writing first so much, I asked them for special permission to write the last book of the series in first person, because I had started self-publishing, and I felt it was much closer to the bone. I felt so much closer to the characters' emotions. So yeah.
Janelle asks, what's your favorite of your books that you've written?
Oh, that's impossible. You know, it's really hard. Like, I think that each book means something different. You know, like for me, one of the books I'm proudest of is Long Shot, because of all the messages I get. You know, you write a romance and you're like, it's a romance, you know, but with Long Shot, I would get messages like, I was in an abusive relationship, and after I read Long Shot, I left, you know, or I had not spoken to my mom. I grew up in an abusive household, and I had not spoken to my mom in 20 years. And after I read Long Shot, I called her. Or after I read Long Shot, I started volunteering in a shelter. You know, that's different. You know what I mean? It's different than, oh my gosh, I had a book hangover. Like that. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And
that's powerful.
I could feel the weight of the impact of that book in a way that I hadn't ever felt before. So as far like, that's one thing. All the King's Men for me is so special because it's so sprawling. You know, you're in Amsterdam, you're in Antarctica, it sprawls. It's a pipeline protest. It's, you know, it's like, oh my gosh, that was such a challenge. I remember sitting down with Emma Scott at maybe not Book Bonanza, at the Dallas signing, the Dallas Bell signing. And I was like, so there's this book, these 2 books I'm writing. And I'm like, and then this is going to happen. And then this is going to happen. And then it's going to be like, we're going to be in Amsterdam. And then in Antarctica, there's a pipeline protest. And then there's an assassination. She was like, literally, Emma is the most encouraging person you could possibly find on the earth. We're really good friends. Emma, Kate Stewart, and I have this little group, and we call each other the underdogs. And so we were sitting at the table, and I was telling them about it. And Emma just looks at me. She goes, "That's really ambitious." I was like, a good thing. She was like, well, it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard. So just pulling that off really meant something to me. The Grip series is incredibly special to me because it's probably my most loved series by readers. And I almost didn't publish it, like literally a week before. I was like, I'm not publishing this, because it dealt with police brutality. It dealt with mass incarceration. It dealt with like driving while Black, you know, it dealt with all the N-word. It dealt with all of these things that nobody was really talking about in romance. And I was really afraid, like this will ruin my career, afraid. And for people to have received it the way they have, I mean, I have people who will like get married and send me pictures of their finger, and for their wedding band, they have the word "still" tattooed on their ring finger. I mean, people use Grip and Bristol's vows as their wedding vows. People have sent me paintings. It's really, you know, and then one of the poems is "We All Bruise." Sarah of Dragonfly Reads, she came to a signing and she was like, would you please just write "We All Bruise"? And I was like, just write it? Because that's there's a poem, there's a song at the end of the Grip number 2 where it's like a whole thing called "We All Bruise," the poem. and I wrote it, and I'm like, my handwriting is awful. And she took my handwriting and had it tattooed onto her arm that says "We all bruised," and I'm just like, what? I can't even, So there's something about that book. People have gotten tattoos and things like that from other books, but there's something about that particular experience that inspires that kind of response. And so it's really, really special to me. And that's the series that most people ask for more of. Even though it has 3 books for one couple, and they're like, more grip and grist.
Someone asked us to ask you if you want. Someone asked us to ask you if you would revisit.
I'm telling you, always. People always like, more grip and Bristol. I'm like, I'll give you 3 books. 3 books. So to answer your question, each one is kind of different for different reasons. And Kimba's was very, very special to me just because I feel like Kimba's probably more like me than any character I've ever written. Like more like the real me than any character I've ever written. And so that was important. And Ezra was important because apparently he's a cinnamon roll. So Christy says, I love Grip so much I have a canvas on my bedroom wall with a still quote. You need to send me a picture of that, Christy. Those things make me cry. Oh, all the Grip love. Still is my favorite too. Savvy Gal says, I love the Grip series. Still is my favorite. It's mine too. And so many people assume it's like a wedding and a baby book, and it's just not. It's the most emotional of the series. It's the most difficult book of the series. Oh, these are great. The assassination was damn. I know. I'm sorry. Favorite couple from the books you've written? Gosh, I don't know. A lot of people talk about the chemistry that's between Lennox and Maxim because it's a very hot push pull. They're both very alpha. It's very intense. They're screwing on tables, and I really love Banner and Jared. And a lot of people have trouble with that book because there's cheating. Spoiler alert, sorry. They don't cheat on each other, but she cheats on her boyfriend. And I get that, but I'm not really interested in writing perfect characters. I'm very interested in good people who make bad decisions and how they recover from them. And so I love Banner and Jared. They were so horny. I mean, they were like having sex at restaurants, they just couldn't keep their hands off each other. And I loved it. And I love the fact that she was full figured and he loved her, 50 pounds in each direction. He just loved her exactly how she was. And a lot of readers write to me and say that Jared is a sociopath. I get it. I get it, because he's very, I did not know what is it called? Gosh, I've forgotten now. But it's when the only thing that is holding someone to any kind of morality is this person. I can't remember what it's called. But it was the first time somebody had said it to me. I was like, oh, and a morality. Okay, I can't think of it. It'll come to me later. But basically, they were saying the only thing that keeps him moral is his attachment to her. Otherwise, he's just like, I don't care. I'm going to get whatever I want, and I don't like people. So.
Someone said morality chain. Does that sound right?
Yeah, that's it. Morality chain. I had part of it. I just couldn't think of the other part. But several people were like, oh my gosh, I love the morality chain that you wrote. And I was like,
I haven't heard of that before.
I wrote a what? A morality chain. I was like, what the hell is a morality chain? And they were like, well, the heroine is the only thing chaining the hero to any kind of moral compass. Outside of her, he's kind of a sociopath. And I was like, oh, did I do that?
I feel like that would fit a lot of dark romances,
Yeah, for sure. I don't write dark romance. I'm like, he's not a sociopath, but he's very alpha, and very single-minded, and he just wants her. He wants her over everything, and he doesn't really care who gets hurt in the process. as long as he gets her. So I'd never really written a hero who was that ruthless, and single-minded when it came to getting her. Who is your favorite hero that you've written also in general as a reader? I don't know who my favorite hero is that I've written, like I've said. I love August because he's so patient and because he's exactly what Iris needs as she's healing in Longshot. I love him. But who I've read. So it's easier for me to talk about my favorite books, because like I said, anything Laura Kinsale is like here for me. Like she's the standard as far as writing is concerned. So Flowers from the Storm. Also Loretta Chase, Lord of Scoundrels, that book,
Yeah.
There's so many. A lot of the Sherry Thomas. I like Meredith Duran. I love historical. It's where I kind of camp out. But contemporary, I love. If you have not read How to Kill a Rock Star, oh my gosh, what are you doing with your life? Tiffany DeBartolo, you guys, okay, we have to go because we've been on for like, an hour and a half? Is this how you guys usually do this?
We usually stop at an hour, but
I'm so sorry.
no, it's fine. We love talking with you.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is my last thing. So I love Tiffany DeBartolo so much. She wrote Have you guys read How to Kill a Rock Star?
Yes.
No.
So good. I have certain books that I reread annually, every year without fail. I at least once a year reread Flowers from the Storm. I reread Lord of Scoundrels. I reread Tiffany DeBartolo. And so I was at a signing. Taryn Fisher invited me to a signing in Virginia last year. I went. We're having the author dinner beforehand. And I'm sitting at the table beside Willow Astor, who is an angel, except she did this really dirty thing. And I'm sitting here. Tiffany DeBartolo is sitting like, what is the word? Not counter.
Catty corner?
Across?
Yeah, let's just say across. Across but down. Whatever that is, across and down. And I say to Willow, I said, you guys have to, that's one of my favorite books like ever in history. Because he's not the typical hero at all. He's not like so attractive. He's skinny, he's emaciated, he dresses weird. He's just not your typical hero at all. And I love that. I love smart guys. I love nerdy guys. I love atypical heroes. Like when people go against convention. And so he's just not typical at all. And that book is not typical at all. And I love that she just burned up all the blueprints and was like, I'm just going to go for it, damn it. And so I saw her and I said, Willow, is that Tiffany DeBartolo? And she was like, yeah, you want to meet her? You guys, did I already tell you this story, Lacey?
I feel like you have, yeah.
I feel like you were there in California, baby, LA.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so tears immediately spring to my eyes. Like as soon as I realize I'm that close to her, tears come to my eyes. And Willow goes, do you want to meet her? I was like, no, I cannot meet her because by now tears are rolling down my cheeks. Like literally tears are rolling down my cheeks because I am in proximity to her. And Willow goes, Tiffany! And I was like, no! And she comes over and I try to play it off by this maniacal grin with tears rolling down my face. I'm like, hi! Tears rolling down my face. She goes, oh, and she just hugs me like, you poor little fangirl. It was amazing. It was amazing. And there are pictures of me like sobbing all over Tiffany. It was great. So she's special to me. Like she's special. Oh yeah, somebody says I need to read the Bennett series now. It's very emotional. In unexpected ways. So, oh, thank you. Long Shot is honest. It's so amazing. Thank you. People are sweet. People are really sweet.
I have another question from Instagram. Lotus and Kimba have like-minded spirits. Did you ever realize that? Was that planned?
You know, I knew that for people who have read the book, they bond around this word hopscotch, you know, and it's in both of their books, but it features in different ways. Well, the same way, it's basically like, you know, emergency call to each other. And they know what it means. I'm in trouble. It's like their own private SOS. I knew that Iris would need someone, you know, someone who was fearless and someone who would love her unconditionally. And I wanted them to have, New Orleans was very crucial, you know, to that story. The setting of Louisiana was very crucial. And I just I could see their whole family. You know what I mean? Like their mothers are sisters. They have a, you know, great grandmother. Like I could see their whole family. They have the voodoo, you know, the high priestess, all of the New Orleans, like, you know, flavor. I could just, as soon as I started writing Iris, Lotus was there immediately. Like as soon as I started writing Iris, I could see Lotus, and then I could see their moms, and I could just see everything. And family was such a big part of that story. So yeah, they are a lot very different. There's a skepticism that Iris has about magic and about voodoo and about all of those things. And Lotus buys into all of that. You know, she lives with their great grandmother. She's trained, you know, by her in a lot of ways. And she accesses something that Iris isn't sure is real, you know? So, yeah. But they're very special women in different ways, because Iris is such a survivor, but so is Lotus. Lotus is badass. You know, she's definitely, I don't know why I was rereading a scene, because I never reread my own books, but I think I was looking for like teasers, you know, going through pages. And I read this scene, for anybody who's read Long Shot, where she, when after the hopscotch moment, when she has this ring and she blows over her hand, it's like she recites this curse over Caleb. And I was like, wow, that was intense. You know, wow. It's something like, you know, it's your days are scattered or something like that. And I was like, wow, Lotus was into some stuff. But I love her. And I love Keenan. I love Hookshot. It's so different from it's so different from Long Shot, but so is Bloodshot. So will we see characters from your previous books in your upcoming trilogy? I'm not sure. I do a lot of crossover. Like lately I've been doing a lot of crossover. Like if you've read Hookshot, Lotus shows up in Kimba's book. And in Hookshot, Grip and Bristol showed up in Hookshot. These are totally different series, but these characters cross between the series. So I've been doing that a lot because readers love it. You know, they love to see those familiar characters in new settings. So we'll see, maybe. In the Hollywood story that won't feel like a Hollywood story, there's definitely crossover. Definitely. Probably from the Grip series. Definitely from the Grip series. These questions are also good. Oh, I want to answer this one. Kennedy, do you have any advice for new book writers? I'll answer this one and then maybe we'll be done, because it's now, we're going on 2 hours. Maybe. Kennedy, do you have any advice for new book writers? The first advice I have is to take your craft very seriously. I recently told someone, self-publishing has made it easy for anyone to publish. Don't be anyone. That's my advice. Don't be anyone. You know, anybody can publish a book now. Don't be anyone. You know, invest in your craft. Like I told you, I've been writing for newspapers since I was 17 years old. And when I started writing fiction, I started from scratch. I started taking courses. I started reading craft books. I started, you know, really reinforcing the writing, you know, reinforcing writing. and making sure that that was tight. And then with that, learn all you can about the business of writing, because you can write an incredible book and nobody knows it exists. You know, learn about marketing, learn about ads, learn about branding, learn all of those things. And those two things together will help you be successful. I mean, as you know, everybody's, and also not to adapt anyone's idea or their their standard for what success is. You know, somebody can say, I'm not successful if I don't hit the New York Times. It's really, really hard to hit the New York Times now. And it's like, and what if you never do? Are you never successful? You know, that's somebody else's standard for success. That's not my standard for success. I may never hit the New York Times, and I'm still going to feel successful, because for me, I measure success by things like the messages that I got after Long Shot, you know, not even by like top 25 or USA Today, but impact. For me, that is success, is impact. So that is, for me, more in my hands, not on the whim of somebody else or what somebody else determines as success. That's advice. And to not compare yourself to anybody else. You know, one of my favorite quotes is that comparison is an act of violence against the self. And I live like that. I don't compare myself to other people. I don't compare my stories to other people's stories. I just stay in my lane, you know?
That was a good question to end on.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for having me for almost 2 hours.
Yeah, thank you for coming on with us.
I had a great time. I really did.
Yeah, I'll have links for Kennedy, everything, all her books, social media in my description. So go follow her, go watch her like Queen Chat Instagram lives. Those are really good.
They were so much fun. They were so. I had to put on makeup and wash myself most days, which is not my pandemic behavior. Because I say that hygiene is the first thing to go in a pandemic. So having to get up and do my hair and put on makeup every day was a trial. But then once I was in the conversations, I was like, I'm glad I did this.
Yeah, and thank you everyone for joining us.
Yes. Thank you. Bye, guys.
Bye.